in 2021. And we are live.
All right, great. So hi, everyone. Welcome to this board governance workshop. It is 5:01 p.m. Can we get a roll call, please?
Trustee Gallagher.
Here.
Trustee Aerosmith.
Here.
Trustee Brown.
Here.
Trustee Goitia.
Here.
And Trustee Verich.
Here. All right, everyone is here. 1C is adoption of the closed session agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, so a motion by Christina, a second by Robert. Is there any discussion? See none. Can we please have a roll call vote?
Trustee Gallagher.
Aye.
Trustee Aerosmith.
Aye.
Trustee Brown.
Aye.
Trustee Goitia.
Aye.
And Trustee Verich.
Aye.
All right, with the 5-0 vote, we have a closed session agenda. The items are disclosed on board docs. I'll now check to see if we have any public comments regarding our closed session items. And we do not. So at this point, the board will adjourn to closed session. We will be back right around 6 p.m. And board, you should have that link in your calendar. See you on the other side. All right, hi everyone. We are just finishing up closed session. We'll probably get started in about 5 to 10 minutes. Thanks for your patience and see you soon. All right, John, if we can move to speaker view. Thank you. All right, so we're back and we are streaming. Everyone ready? All right, cool. Welcome back, everyone. We are returning from closed session where we did take 2 actions. During closed session, the board approved the proposed settlement agreement in case 0114202211 with a 5-0 vote. The board also approved the proposed settlement agreement in case 0114202212 with a 5-0 vote. All right, welcome to this board governance workshop. This is not a regular meeting, but this is a board governance workshop. As you may know, this meeting is live streaming on the internet, but I have to say that, and now I have. We're gonna move to just a couple rules. Because members of the board are joining tonight via teleconference, all votes tonight are recorded via a roll call. While there's no physical location available for the public to join, members of the public may submit a request to speak through the public comment card, which is available on the district's website and on board docs. That, if everyone could please rise, put yourselves on mute and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So item 3C is to approve tonight's agenda. Before I do, ask for a motion. I think just addressing a couple realities, right? One, I've heard from some board members that their head is maybe potentially not, a lot has happened in the last week with people storming the Capitol building, democracy kind of coming under, coming under attack. And so I think people are in different headspaces. And I think just recognizing that at the beginning of this meeting, that we're trying to return to normalcy when things are anything but normal on a lot of different factors. And then 2 is that there's a global pandemic that is at its peak. Hopefully this is the peak. It is worse than it's ever been. And that is not something that's on tonight's agenda because this is one of our board governance workshops. These are things that we regularly have so we can improve as a board and make sure that we're being effective as a team. And so some of the things that people may expect to see on an agenda on January 14th, 2021 are not on the agenda, right? We have our regular meeting next Thursday, which lots of that discussion will happen. So just want to name all that at the beginning because it is a kind of a weird time to have a governance workshop. And I think just recognizing that at the outset is something I thought we should do. So what tonight is, this is a night where we kind of have 3 main things that we're going to talk about as a board. One is how we're going to use 2021 to do some strategic planning. One is how we are going to use 2021 to do some diversity, equity, and inclusion training for ourselves. And 3 is how we're going to improve and do some board and professional development on our effectiveness as a board. And that's what tonight's meeting is about. There's a lot of things missing from that list. And so once again, just want to name that up front for people watching at home and just to remind ourselves about. So without any further ado, I'll ask for a motion to approve our agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so 3C, adoption of agenda has been motioned seconded. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote? And sorry, I muted you, Dr. Brown.
Trustee Gallagher,
Aye.
trustee Aerosmith,
Aye.
trustee Brown,
Aye.
trustee Goitia,
Aye.
trustee Verich.
Aye.
All right, thank you. So the 5-0 vote, we now have an agenda. And just for board, if you could mute when you're not speaking, just so we're aware of who's trying to speak and who's not, that would be helpful. And please don't be offended if I'm sitting there muting people from the sky. We are going to move into public comments. The board welcomes comments from the public. If you'd like to address the board, please fill out the digital blue card, which is located on our website and on board docs on the agenda. You'll be called on to comment when your item is reached on the agenda. If the item is not on the agenda, you will comment at this time. Provisions of the California Brown Act preclude any action being taken on any item that does not appear on the posted agenda for action. Oral presentations and communications to the board are limited to 3 minutes per person and 20 minutes per topic. We do have 4 digital blue cards this evening. And so we'll go ahead and start with our first in the order they were received. John, if you could please get Ken Smith on the phone.
I'm gonna move to Gina Ash, and then maybe we'll
Okay.
try him at the end.
Great.
All right, I have Gina here.
All right, hi Gina, you're on with the board and you have 3 minutes. Whenever you want to start, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thank you. My name is Gina Ash. As a member of a parents group in support of reopening classrooms, there have been some questions posed by the group I was hoping could be addressed possibly at next week's meeting. But some of the questions are, number one, what is the CARES Act money been spent on so far? And 2, if we can get a high-level update as to what steps have been taken to begin preparing our schools and classrooms for the return of staff and students, and what possibly still needs to be done. Number 3, if our teachers and staff have been vaccinated by late March or April, will this change the timeline to reopen our classrooms for in-person instruction for all the students? Or is the plan to keep them closed for the year regardless? And number 4, can we get an update on the failure rates for the most recent grading period, as well as count of how many students have essentially just stopped logging into class since the beginning of the year? From what's been reported, San Francisco has lost over 1,000 students. So we're curious how many, if any, that we have lost in our district. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gina. And if you could shoot me an email with those, we can try to get the answers before the next meeting. If you heard that. If not, I'll shoot you an email if I don't hear from you by tomorrow morning. All right, we're going to go ahead and move to our next speaker, Kelly Masney. I apologize if I did not pronounce that correctly.
All right, we are ready to go.
All right, hi Kelly, you're on with the board. You have 3 minutes. Take it away.
Thank you very much for your time. My name is Kelly Matheny, and I'm a parent at Lee High School. This might not be the right meeting to comment, but I just wanted to make sure the board understood many parents' wishes. And I wanted to start also by saying that I value our teachers, our staff, and our students, and I care deeply about their mental and their physical health. But many studies have shown that we can safely return to the classroom if we follow proven protocols. I want to encourage our board to get students back to the classroom as soon as possible. The mental health crisis and the educational deficit that these young adults are experiencing is monumental and increasingly detrimental. For example, emergency room visits due to mental health problems have grown 31% in the 13 to 17-year-old age group last year, and there's a large increase in students failing math, science, and English. A recent article authored by a large number of UCSF medical professionals and leaders calls for a return to the classroom by February 1st. They cite robust data demonstrating that schools may be safely reopened and school-based transmission remains very infrequent when universal masking and social distancing rules are carefully followed and that long-term school closures have a detrimental, measurable impact on children and adolescents. I'd be happy to share the article with the board if you haven't seen it. With the recent increase in vaccine distribution, I'm hopeful that we will return to the classroom soon. Please reopen schools as soon as possible. It can be done safely, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, next up we have John McGowan.
Kaylin, that last speaker's name?
Kelly, and that's Maisni. Maisini.
Sounded like her.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Kalen.
Thank you.
Here.
All right, hey John, you're on with the board. You have 3 minutes. Take it away.
Thank you. My name is John McGowan. I'm a teacher at Prospect High School. I wanted to speak to the superintendent's recommendation as he put out in his last bulletin about he will recommend that schools remain in level 1 distance learning for the foreseeable future, or at least until it's reassessed in late February. I want to support that decision. And how weird is it to hear a union guy saying, oh, yeah, superintendent's right. Do what he says. But it seems to me that while there are costs to not having the schools open, there are costs to opening them. And one of the criteria he used for making that recommendation was a report called The Effect of School Reopenings on COVID-19 Hospitalizations. I read it. Haven't had to read academic paper in a while. That was interesting. But there were a couple of things that stood out. It studied the effects of increased rates in hospitalizations in communities that have reopened schools, and it found a correlation up to a certain point and not past. So we fall into the category of counties that they couldn't say it would be safe or not. But the things that jumped out at me was the last page and the conclusions. It said the underlying assumption of COVID-19 school decision-making has been that opening up schools to in-person instruction would benefit students and parents in many ways, but at a cost of spreading the virus and harming teachers and the community as a whole. While we find evidence of that this trade-off exists in counties with already high transmission rates, which is us, as teachers, we sacrifice a lot. We spend our own money on our students. We spend our own personal time, our unpaid time to help our students. There should be a limit. I do not wish to be asked to sacrifice my health. And this report states that under conditions it will occur, under the conditions our county is in, that is a risk. So it's something to think about, that we teachers are human beings. We want to help the students in our community. We don't want to get sick doing it. So I am all in favor of the superintendent's current recommendation. When he says something I don't like, I'll be less in favor of it. But, but thank you for listening to my opinion.
Thank you, John. And John, maybe we could try Ken Smith one more time.
Okay.
we are ready. I have Ken here.
All right, hey Ken, you're on with the board. I got 3 minutes. Take it away.
Okay. I know that at San Jose City College, we went through a pilot program, is how we designated it, to where we could go back to class and teach in person. I just think we really need to get these kids back in some form of socialization. That's really just all what I wanted to say.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, and I'll be happy to help in any way. I've put forth I've got my dental practice back open full bore, and I'm helping teach, and I help set forth their program where we can teach in person. So anyway, I thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right,
Bye-bye.
and thus that concludes our public comments for the evening. So we will move on to, lost my papers, item 5, our board workshop. So like I said at the top of the meeting, this is a board workshop where we're kind of thinking about how we can, as a board, take a step back and effectively use 2021 to be more effective and make sure that we are on a good overall path, and we're also doing the development that we need to do for ourselves in order to be effective. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight. And there's really 3 items that we're going to be focusing on. One is how we're going to use this year to do some strategic planning and some strategic visioning. The other is how we're going to do some diversity, equity, and inclusion training for ourselves. And then the third is how we're going to do board and professional development so we can be more effective as a team. And we divided this up, and so different board members have different pieces that they're going to lead that discussion on. And I think when we talked about this last, we're going to be doing a little bit of, maybe it's a little planning to plan, right? But maybe a little bit deeper than the planning to plan from last time, how we use this year. So we can take them really in whatever order people want to take them.
Seems more sense to me to take governance first. What do the rest of you think?
Works for me. All right, so governance is Linda and Stacy. Before we do this, I think last time we said it's gonna be take like half an hour per section. Does that feel right still?
I thought we said 45.
45, okay, yeah, 45.
You know what? We want to be short and sweet.
Okay, well, let me do this. I'll put a timer on for 30 minutes for all of these, and I'll just name when we hit 30 minutes. It doesn't mean we have to stop. It's just a way to check ourselves against time. If that works for you. Okay.
You want to take it off, Linda?
Well, we spoke around this topic very broadly last night, but I really liked an idea you had of doing kind of a round robin, going around several times on what are we doing that we think we're doing pretty well? What are we doing that maybe we should stop doing? And what should we start doing? Would that be a good place to begin? If that seems to you further down the rung, then I'll leave it to you to kick it off.
Well, what do our colleagues think in terms of an activity? I think I'll give a 30-second elevator on what Linda and I talked about last night.
Okay, good.
We're really looking at, when we look at governance, governance is about setting direction. Governance is about creating the culture. And governance is about accountability. And a lot of what Linda and I talked about last night was accountability because of recent events. But so there's some areas that governance teams typically look at on a regular basis. And Robert, I know Moreland probably did this quite a lot while you were on the Moreland board. And I think you guys actually, I've looked at your governance handbook over the years, and it's a pretty good example of good governance. But we have our protocols handbook, which I think's been attached to the agenda. It's some work that we did in the past. And what we tend to do is we do some work and we kind of check a box, but we're not doing that continuous, let's take a look back at this. Let's see if there are things that, things change. Are there things that we want to, other things that we want to incorporate? That's kind of where that continue, stop, start exercise came about. But I think in terms of a focus for 2021 of board professional development, I think if we were to get into a regular cadence of looking at our protocols and making sure that we still had the right protocols and that we didn't need to, tweak any of those things. That we look at maybe establishing some real norms, explicit norms, because that's how you develop the culture. Norms are about the agreements that we have about how we're going to behave with one another. And I think our board historically has had implicit norms, right? So nobody's ever written it down and things like that. So maybe we took a concerted effort to kind of talk about how we want to be together as a team, the example that we want to set for the district. And then the last piece in terms of accountability is, we want to get to the end of the year and we want to look at what goals have we set for ourselves within the realm of board professional development. And we want to know how well we did. So what kind of goals and measurements might we establish throughout the year so that when we get to the end of the year, we can know if we did great, excellent, outstanding, or just average in our efforts. So I hope that kind of helps give some context to like what our thinking is. Did I get that right, Linda?
Yes, and one of the things that occurred to me as you were speaking was, and I'm making a note right now, when I was going through my files, trying to get a sense of historically, what did we set out to do and be maybe 8 years ago, 6 years ago, 3 years ago, and just look at some of that work product that sort of shows our progress along the way. I came across a file on board self-evaluation where I had amassed samples of probably a dozen different good templates for board self-evaluation. There's a lot of that out there and there's a lot of good stuff out there. But I think what made me feel overwhelmed by looking at that was that, yeah, it's out there and we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. But I think that what Stacy's driving at, and I agree, is that in terms of accountability, our board self-evaluation should be tied very specifically to accountability for the goals that we create for ourselves, which makes that whole pile of documents very nice, but not personal. In other words, it needs to be tailored to us and what we're doing and what we value. And so, yeah, it's fine to look at those things as examples, but in the past, we've tried to use sometimes a tool that we just lifted, and it's much better if we create the metrics in the tool. Sorry, so I just wanted to address that last part of what you said.
So thoughts from our colleagues?
I can jump in. Or go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just going to repeat back kind of what I heard just to make sure that I'm understanding clearly what the idea is. So, so it sounds like we could potentially have a workshop where we look at the board protocols handbook that we have that Linda made and think about if anything needs to be adjusted or whether we are actually using them and maybe we just need to actually consistently use them. That we would, through that conversation, come up with some potentially explicit norms, and then choose, after our conversation about our strategic goals, we would choose a self-evaluation tool. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah.
Yes, And with regard to the protocols handbook, I looked at it tonight. It's top heavy on protocols and lighter on norms. There are norms in there, and we do honor some of them, but the focus tends to be more on protocols. And I think the problem with the board protocols handbook, and probably the reason that we don't sit and consult it, is it's just too long. When you're setting up a laptop, you get a quick start menu. I don't see anything wrong with us having a document that is in depth, but I also think we need a companion quick start menu for the board protocols handbook. Something that just sort of encapsulates key things in each area. And so that would be one of my goals. But again, I don't know what the board thinks about any of that. And there's no point generating documents if they're not useful, if they're not easy, if they're not accessible.
Yeah, and so my thoughts are, I think this is time well spent. I think I think there are a lot of examples out there, some more urgent than others, of people who just in government who are not working well together right now across our country. And I think, sometimes we slip into that. But I think for the most part, we don't, right? Because we do have some shared vision, norms, stuff like that. And I think pulling that out and being more explicit and saying, hey, we're gonna really work on these 3 this year, and we're gonna see how we did in December.
But having the norms and having them on record, if you want to compare it to what's gone on nationally, think of them as guardrails. We won't always be the people sitting on this board. We'll be rotating off in 1s and 2s, and having a structure in place of what we value in terms of how governance is carried out in the Campbell Union High School District, I think is something we all want to take responsibility for leaving to the people who will follow us.
Yeah. And so I think it's a really useful, it's a good way to use time. I think also the challenge is we're now in this Zoom world, right? And so I can very easily picture what that would look like if we're sitting around and had chart paper and did things on walls and things. So I think
Yeah.
the challenge is going to be, how do we do that in a virtual space? When do we think we might all be in a room together again if vaccines are coming, right? And like, what does that lesson plan look like? That's going to be the only thing that I think gets in the way.
Yeah.
So those are all my thoughts.
Yeah, and I think that, I think for tonight, if we can get some alignment on, this to me is like the board professional development work plan for 2021, right? And so we're starting at the high level, right? We're going to focus on protocols, norms. We're going to create some goals and measurements for how we do on these types of things. We're going to come up with some evaluation method. We're going to commit to doing our evaluation, a formal evaluation at the end of the year in one of the workshops. We're going to, and kind of the outcome of the big outcome, I think, for doing all of this would be that we would be making the board professional development a continuous improvement process, become part of our DNA. So that's the work plan. We've got it at the highest of levels now. And then we can start looking at, we have a workshop, another governance workshop that's supposed to come. I forgot the dates, right? But we can start looking at, maybe we want to take this piece of it at the next governance workshop. Maybe we want to take, have an agendized discussion about this at a board meeting. So we don't have to necessarily wait for, we can piece this down a little bit so that we're making movement on this, but I think we all appreciate that we're not going to be able to move as quickly as in pre-COVID times when we can just kind of get in a room and hash a lot of things out more than you can do in this medium. Does that work?
Part I would add too is you mentioned that Moreland did some of this work, and I go back to the story of board president or one of the board members when I got on found some of these protocols, found some ideas, some leadership stuff from CSBA. And it's been a 14-year process. They didn't start there, right? So you guys have started in a great place. And Linda, I agree, the protocols handbook is pretty big. And but there's some really good stuff in there. And I agree with having a quick version of it.
I liked the document that you provided to us last month, the 8 indicators of an effective governance team. You know, those are all, I agreed with everything on that page.
Stacy, right? Stacy provided that. I don't think it was me.
You provided the in-depth that went behind that.
Oh.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'd written your name and I guess I was confused. Okay.
Robert and I provided that information.
That's correct.
But
No.
when you think about, and I'm going to go back to the idea that Stacy threw out last night of the, you know, what are we doing pretty well? What do we need to stop? What do we need to start? When you create a handbook that is protocols and norms, it's like, it's not specific to anything happening in that moment. It's something that's meant to endure for a little bit and be sort of the umbrella. But underneath that umbrella, and maybe there are things that can become part of that, but underneath it, there are specific things that maybe we could think of to make it more meaningful to us or more real to us and not be such an abstract discussion of things that we've done in the last year that we think we handled rather well and why. Things that we did in the last year that, you know, maybe in a general sense weren't the best idea or didn't go as well as we would have liked. And there should be absolutely no blaming, no finger pointing, no negativity, no nothing, just that when something like this comes up, what would be a best way to move forward on it? Well, and it can be a very general thing. For example, one of the things that I think needs to stop is something Stacy already alluded to, which is starting something and not doing the follow through. You know, sometimes we don't follow through. And so that again, that can be incorporated into a document to last. But very specifically, we can think of some ways, examples of that in our life as a governance team. So I just don't want this to be a boring exercise in talking in 30,000 feet CSBA speak. I also want it to be meaningful for us in terms of our real lives as governance team members over the past couple of years.
I think it sounds like that would be a good exercise for us to do in terms of at the more micro level, more adjacent to our work, the goals that we would set for ourselves that would be incorporated into our self-evaluation. And then we can extrapolate any trends or patterns that we see in specific cases to a potential norm or protocol if we all feel that that is appropriate. Mm-hmm. So I think that activity could be used for dual purpose.
Yeah, you know, the other thing too, and you know, Linda and I were thinking about what to do to make tonight kind of fun. And, you know, I also think that if we're up for doing, I mean, that's just a framework that, you know, I've used for years when I've been doing, you know, team building stuff. But I think you have to have some homework. I think we would need to have some homework to come in instead of, you know, because I could very easily, the things that I talked to Linda about last night, about some of the things that I would like want to start or maybe want to stop, I probably couldn't repeat them to you tonight. Because
probably couldn't what?
Probably couldn't repeat them tonight.
Oh, remember them? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's so, you know, I think that could be like a planned exercise, but you know.
Yeah, I sat on the couch in total quiet for about 2 hours this afternoon and just gave myself a little space to meditate on it, reflect, because I suspect that we are all in a state of having a little bit of focus difficulty right now. A lot has gone on in the last week, and I find myself a little, just a little unfocused. I really needed that time to just sit with my pad and my pencil, not look at any files, notes, books, references, nothing. Just sit there and think about what's my life been like as a board member, and how's that gone? So yeah, it was useful to do that.
Yeah, I think that was gonna be I think that's a good homework assignment, right? Of something to bring into the next time we talk about it. And there might be more, right? And I think whatever y'all, within reason, please don't give us 45 hours of homework, but
What's
maybe
the homework policy say?
yeah, it is our homework policy. And speaking of, so like alluding to the homework policy, I think the other interesting piece that we could be intentional about is with our student board members, right? I'm sure there are some board things that go really well from their perspective and some things that don't, in terms of like what it is like to be a student board member, right? What it is like to have like advisory vote and different things. And maybe there's some areas of improvement there as well. That homework might look different, but.
Well, I think, that's an interesting point, because I think that, and I want to actively seek the input of our student board members, because that's kind of like getting a 360 review. It's like we're looking internally, we're looking at ourselves and stuff like that. Now you're getting like a perspective from the outside, which I think is very valuable. And that's the only perspective I want is students, okay? No, I'm kidding.
I want to be sure that I'm clear about the agenda plan, that tonight we are going to be scheduling and holding ourselves to 3 governance workshops, 1 dealing with us as a governance team, 1 dealing with the strategic plan, and 1 dealing with equity. Is this correct?
That's not the impression I had in terms of, scheduling. I think that tonight is kind of like the planning for what we have 3 times. We've made space for 3 governance workshops.
Okay.
Tonight is kind of talking through what we might do in those governance workshops. And one way to do it is go, this one is going to be governance, and this one's going to be diversity, and this one's going to be strategic planning. But that's probably not going to yield the outcomes we want.
Yeah, really. Like I think there'll probably be time where there's a split in a workshop, or like Stacy mentioned, hey, we're gonna actually do this during a regular board meeting, right, with different pieces, and so like mapping that part out.
So
well, yeah, I know that personally, I'm very eager for us to be able to meet in person. And I'm probably in a better position than anybody else on the board, because it's the first time being ancient may actually be valuable. They have lowered the level for getting vaccinated to age 65, except that nobody seems to be doing it. I've called everywhere. But when the time comes that we can actually meet in person, this work is going to be more effective, particularly the work around equity, which I think is going to require us to be very vulnerable, very open, very, very communicative, in a way that would be much, much better if we can sit with each other.
Yeah, and I think Christina's going to talk about that, like what works in person versus what doesn't, as well. So, okay, so what do we need to do on the professional development front? Do y'all have what y'all need from the board?
I think so. I think what I'll commit to following up, and Linda, if you'll work with me on this, is I took some notes. I will jot down what I believe would be a board professional development work plan for 2021. And it'll kind of just start with the, purpose, desired outcomes, the who, what, when, where, why kind of stuff. And then we can start looking at, we might want to have some, hey guys, we think that everybody should read this book, and kind of say, go get this book and read it, and and then we can have whatever those things are. But we'll plan out things that can be incorporated into agenda items, and then we'll plan out, a portion of the next governance workshop to kind of get us to what we're trying to do in the work plan.
Do you think you could have that by our February 4th meeting, and then we can discuss it? Because I think next week, I don't know, unless you want to do it next week.
I do not want to do it for next week.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
I have to stay off, and I am actually
next week?
What?
What's next week?
Our next board meeting.
Oh, you meant for the 21st. Yeah, no, for February 4.
Yeah, because that really would mean that it would be done for tomorrow, so it could be.
If we don't give ourselves a deadline, I work better with a deadline. Can we do this by February 4, you think?
Yes.
Yes,
yeah.
okay.
I have no problem with February 4. I don't want to do it for the 21st.
Yeah, okay. So I
Violent agreement.
want to get moving. I don't want to talk about stuff. I want to do stuff.
Awesome. That went really well. Should we move
Okay, how
on?
much time do we have left?
Let me look. 8 minutes and 18 seconds.
I yield my time.
Great. All right. Strategic planning or diversity, equity, inclusion?
Strategic planning.
All right. Strategic planning. Robert, do you want to kick us off? Do you want me to take a stab at it? He's nodding. He's going to go.
Yeah, well, just taking a look at it, looking at the strategic plan and some input from Bob. Kayla and I talked about the strategic plan, where it was at, what we thought about it, what its intended purpose is, and that we have a good strategic plan that is mostly a mission statement, not necessarily identifying some things that are important that we should be working on over the next 3 to 5 years, and not giving us any measurement that we got there. So breaking it down a little bit, thoughts on the current strategic plan, what next steps might be. Is the plan current? What should we work on? Do we need to redo the plan? Do we need to make adjustments to the plan, or do we need to make minor tweaks to the plan? And then does the strategic plan changes need to be board-led, board input, board review and approval? I've been a part of a couple of strategic plan developments, and they've obviously pre-COVID. The one that went the best, there was probably 80 to 100 people involved. There were several tables of 8 to 10 people. There were some questions put out. And when we all came back together and reported out, it was like we were all sitting at the same table. So the district and all of the stakeholders came up with the same things. And each table had, this isn't necessarily how we have to do it, but each table had administrators, teachers, staff, parents. There weren't students that I can remember, but it also was K-8. So obviously it's a different animal. I think there were some students involved. I just don't think there were many. And then
I pause you really quick, Robert. I think we lost Linda.
She went to go work on the plan.
Yeah, she was so excited. She just left. Should we pause until we get her back?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to give her a ring and just see. It's probably a tech issue, and then I'll be right back.
She could have gone back to the couch with their pad and pen. While we're paused, does anybody care if I report out the Shark score?
I'd love to hear the Shark score.
I don't want to ruin it if you're planning to watch it. I haven't seen it, but I do know. The end of the first, we're up 2-0.
At the end of the first?
End of the first period in Arizona. If you haven't noticed, the first month of games is pretty much San Jose on the road. And
well, I don't think we'll be playing any games at home until for quite some time.
It's interesting. There's like little pieces that you pick up and you go, oh, the announcers aren't even traveling.
Hey, everyone, can we take a 10-minute recess? So come back at 7?
Yes.
This is weird. Last time
Thank
this
you.
happened, I
All right. So for board members, quick update, or I guess for everyone, Linda's internet at her house is out. So she's going to be dialing in while she tries to get her internet working again. Perils of Zoom, right? So she'll be hopping on via the phone in a couple minutes. Okay, there's Linda. All right, Linda, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm in the meeting.
Can we change her name so it's not her phone number?
Yup. All right, I realized my computer was on mute, so I didn't hear anything that just happened. So, Linda, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay. All right, we're good.
All right, and I'll just do my best to narrate what's happening. We're waiting on, well, we're just waiting on all trustees to have their cameras back on, and we are now at that place. And so we're back 7:01 p.m. So board, where we're at was just starting the discussion of our strategic plan. Robert, I think we lost Linda maybe a couple minutes in, so maybe you could just start back at the beginning.
Certainly.
Cool.
We took a look at the strategic plan and saw that it had a lot, some good mission aspects to it, but it didn't necessarily have some things to work towards or some goals slash. There are stuff in there that are goals, right? Attract and retain, readiness for students, those kinds of things. But we want to put some things in that were some measurable, some identifiable needs, and was the thinking. The next steps is, do we need to redo the plan? Do we need to make adjustments to the plan, or do we need to make minor tweaks to the plan? The strategic plan changes need to be board-led, board input, or just board review and approval after some work goes on outside of that. And Linda, you might not have been here when I talked about when Moreland did a strategic plan, that there was.
Right. No, yeah, I heard that part. Yeah.
You did, great, thank you. And then finally, the governance team probably should identify, or whoever does the work, 3 to 5 things for the district to be focused on over the next 3 to 5 years, or take some suggestions, and then the board pick 3 to 5 to work on over the next 3 to 5 years, and put those in the strategic plan with some measurables. Bob, is there something you want to add to that about measurables or about anything?
No.
I'll just add that I'm all for some measurables.
Yeah, so I think like a piece around what is true by the end of this process, right? I think what is true by the end of this process is that we have looked at our current strategic plan, which we'll rename a strategic vision, because that's kind of more what it is, and say, hey, we have this strategic vision document that we made 3 years ago. What pieces are still relevant today? What pieces can we throw out? What is glaringly missing that we want to add as a process? We go through that process. Secondarily, it's, hey, we want to pull out 3 to 5 core metrics that we want to tell staff, this is really important to focus on, right? And we go through whatever process it is, whether it's bringing people in, whether it's doing it in small groups. That's the end product for that, is we can point to specific things, which I think is what Robert just said, but I'm trying to just put a cap on. That is what is true in December, if we decide it's by December, in August, if we decide it's August, so those are our thoughts.
So my recollection, and I agree with everything, that this really is not a strategic plan, it's a strategic vision. And I think when we introduced it, that's what we called it. And somehow it morphed into the strategic plan. And so I concur that the piece that's missing of this is a strategic vision, and the piece that's missing is the actionable part, which is you've got your strategic anchors, which you could call goals, big, hairy, audacious goals if you follow, God, blanking on his name, objectives, whatever you want to call them, but then you have to break those down into, in 3 years to get to this, this goal, within this strategic anchor, if it's attract, retain, and develop top talent, you kind of have to get to the, what's the thing that we know we're moving the needle, right? And then the account, the reviews and the communication around that. So I agree with the approach. I think that just kind of I think it could be a workshop to just kind of take the strategic vision and go through and make sure that it's still relevant and see, and do that kind of things. I wouldn't want to start over, even though the process that we went through to get to where we were at was a very good process. I would want to kind of do that refresh of the vision. And then I think that it kind of comes down to, for me, it's the infamous CSBA line, right? Board is up here, and the staff is down here, and the superintendent's here, kind of straddling across the middle. And that's the piece where we really have to get I think that's where we have to get the clarity that we want, right? So how do we make this actionable? How Bob turns it into a tactical plan to implement with staff is not a place that I want to be in as a board member. But I want to kind of create that buffer zone so that we're very clear about what our expectation is in all of these strategic anchor areas. And we're very clear about what those measurements are. And we're very clear about how we're going to review those measurements. And we're very clear about, that whole idea of how we're going to hold all of us accountable to achieving these goals in our strategic plan over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't want to start from the top again. I think we have a good framework to work with.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. One thing I'm considering right now is just that while these are 3 separate topics that we are discussing tonight, there are many overlapping pieces. I'm thinking about how our strategic plan and our goals should be informing our self-evaluation, and how our mission and values will be aligning to both of those. And so that's just a comment, basically. Yeah, I think we have a lot of stakeholder input into the current mission and vision that we have. And I think it still makes sense to interrogate it and be critical of what is still appropriate and relevant and what might not be.
I don't think we need to take the full 30 minutes on this one. We kind of massage it out. Kaylin, anything more?
Yeah, I guess so. For next steps, it could be that, similar to what Linda and Stacy are doing, with bringing some sort of roadmap to the February 4th meeting to discuss, since they will be related, right? The roadmaps are going to have to be related because, there's only so much time.
So Kaylin, can I suggest that maybe you and I grab some time either over the weekend or on Monday? I don't know about you, I have Monday off. And maybe we create like a template of what a work plan looks like for, and then basically Linda and I take all right, we've got a template of what the work plan is. We'll do board professional development. Then you can work with Robert and Christina on the work plan for strategic plan and diversity and inclusion training. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And even to the point, it's like if you have the vision and want, like, we can connect and just I can react to it.
Yeah, I'm not saying we have to meet person to person, but just kind of do some collaboration.
Yeah, for sure. That works for me.
All right. Well, I'll take that as an action item too. And then we can socialize it. That, I think we could socialize at the next board meeting.
For sure. Cool. Thank you, Robert. And now unless there's anything else on that, we'll move to.
Well, first, take some credit. You were involved in that. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah. And we may have now, no, Bob is there. Okay, great. Losing people left and right. All right. Yeah, thanks. So Christina is leading our last portion of the evening. Take it away.
Okay, so just wanted to remind folks kind of our timeline and context of how we got here. I did upload a document on Board Docs if you would like to follow along with me. I'm going to do some framing before I jump into the details of most of it. But we as a board approved resolution number 2610-120 at the October 1st meeting, defining the role of the governance team in driving equitable change. And in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion within that specific resolution, we approved a resolution that included, be it resolved, that we will, as a board, become familiar with the ways in which the structural barriers to equity are experienced by our students and employees. And this resolution was presented by Linda and Stacy. And there was a second part that said, well, there were many parts, but I pulled just a couple that seemed the most relevant to the purposes of this plan. The other was to take part in team development and training to build shared knowledge, vocabulary, values, and commitments for improved efforts. So in considering a plan to bring before you in brainstorming, a few things I thought were important to consider. One, as was brought up earlier, we are in this virtual context, and to do deep, authentic work requires vulnerability. And it also requires consistent conversation and time. And so you'll see later in the proposed timeline that this would be a series of workshops rather than one workshop, because it is not a sit and get type of conversation or type of learning experience. This is an ongoing type of learning experience that would be following dual paths of both individual, independent choice learning, and then shared collaborative experiences of learning that we would then be bringing together. The other thing that I thought of was that I, as a white woman, should not be the only person coming up with this idea. And so I reached out to Dr. Marco Murillo at Santa Clara University. He currently serves as the Director of Strategic Initiatives within the School of Education and Counseling Psychology, as well as being the interim director for the Latinx Education Research Center. And so he gave me some really good ideas and considerations in terms of how we could go about this. So some of the background rationale for this is thinking that, you know, we could start with some learning experiences that would likely be a little bit less conversation heavy and more information gathering and independent, as we are virtual, moving towards hopefully being in person as the time moves on, but remaining flexible depending on the circumstances. So that being said, I put on my teacher hat and tried to backwards plan, thinking about what would be ideal to be true by the end of this year. And I came up with these couple essential questions pulling from that resolution that we would be able to answer these. What structural barriers to equity contribute to the disparate outcomes for groups of students in our district? There are so many different ways that we could explore diversity, equity, and inclusion, but as trustees for a school district, I think that we should narrow that scope to how it affects students in our district and our employees and our role in those outcomes. And so we would want to be able to build that knowledge and vocabulary so that as we are making decisions and looking at data, we have that shared knowledge, and that we would be then, number two, be able to better lead through an equity-driven framework. And so given that those are the essential questions, some of the learning objectives that underpin those essential questions to be able to answer those would include explaining how social structures historically and currently have impacted student outcomes within schools, defining terms and building shared vocabulary as mentioned earlier, and to apply historical knowledge to current student outcomes, in particular around data analysis when it comes to student experience and student outcomes. There's a proposed timeline here, and this is where, you know, things could kind of be reordered pretty easily. You know, you could follow the rationale for a different flow pretty easily. But first, I think understanding how dominant cultures are, how they come to be, how our district has one, how our community has one, to go to the literature from critical race theory and be able to pull some definitions, create some norms for the time so that we can be effectively vulnerable, so that we can take on this work and that it's not just a checklist item. And to be clear about what this work is and what it's not, because this is not something that staff is doing. This is not a policy. It's not a program. It's individual and collective work that we as board members are doing to further our own understanding so that we can be better advocates for our students. Session 2 would be the history of race and racism. That's getting into some of those structural barriers and the historical structures and understanding some of those terms. Then being able to extrapolate to some intersectionality and especially how that applies to data, using race as kind of the starting point, but then building in lots of different identity groups. And then how we can be looking at current issues and how those tie to the historic structural barriers to equity. And that would be kind of like Stacy mentioned earlier. The idea would be that with this learning, this becomes part of the DNA and it's ongoing. I found some possible resources in talking with Dr. Murillo and with Dr. Bravo as well. And we have a couple books here. I found that Stanford is currently doing a race and power leadership series. And so they are streaming these kind of workshop lectures, what have you, online every week. And so they just started, I think they're on the second one, but they're available post the time that they're being streamed. So those are available on YouTube, and those are experts in the field. And so that is a good resource that we could take advantage of. TED Talks can be really great. I found a couple of good ones. There's a couple of documentaries and podcasts. This list is not exhaustive, but gives an idea of the direction that we could move into. The remaining questions that I have and would like additional feedback on beyond your thoughts of what I have already presented include, you know, how much of a time commitment are we willing to make? Because like we said, there will likely be some sort of homework in between these sessions. And so looking at kind of what's the appetite of the board in terms of how much do we want to, you know, bite. We don't want to bite off more than we can chew, right? And then the other question is around the facilitator. And so, you know, I was thinking that it could be helpful to have somebody facilitate some of this with us. You know, I've done some of this brainstorming, but we could have somebody else leading us through some of this. Who might that be? And just want to name again that all with everything that is happening in the circumstances of this moment, I think it makes it partly even more difficult to do this work, but also even more important and necessary. So that was probably a lot, and I'm happy to engage in discussion and hear thoughts and questions.
It was a lot, and I really applaud you for all the thoughtfulness that you've put into that. I like everything I heard. I particularly fixated on when you talked about narrowing the focus and looking at removing barriers, because as you said, this is not work done at the sites, this is work done by the board, but the board has to set policy. And so from a policy standpoint, we need to know and we need to understand what barriers may exist, because that's where we come in. I like everything you said, and I'm prepared to commit the time to it.
I think it's.
I'm going to stop there.
I think it's clear, Christina, that this is an area that you have some passion about. So I concur. Part of the motivation that what motivated me to work on that October 1st resolution last year was that I think that this work, that the board doing this work is kind of we can't make the progress we want to see happen in our schools, in our climate, in our culture, any faster than the board can do this work and get this, kind of go through this. I'll call it an awakening, right, and things like that. So I think this is really critical, and things that getting the workshop set up was really just kind of like, let's just start making some space, making more time, more space for time. If we're really serious about bringing about the changes, we've got to lead it, and we'll never lead. We will always be the bottleneck if we don't invest in doing this work. So I'm committed to that. I think that when we do come together to do work together as a team, I think it's critical that it's facilitated, because if you don't have a facilitator, when you're doing this kind of work, if you don't have a facilitator there, if you've kind of given the facilitation chore to one of us, or kind of shared that, it kind of takes away from the experience. So I think finding the right facilitator, and even if, having a little bit of budget so that we do have the right facilitator, is an important success factor. And then how this kind of ties in a little bit with what we just talked about with the strategic vision is, we have a guiding principle around equity, and it was informed. We created that based upon how the world looked in 2016, I think it was. And the world looks a lot different right now, right? We've kind of reached a tipping point, and et cetera. So I think that's a really important tie to the strategic plan, is looking at those types of guiding principles and understanding that we want to have a guiding principle around equity, but really fine-tuning what that might look like based upon some of the things that we learn going through this process, or this training for what you've laid out for us. I'm going to stop there.
Could I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Because I'm afraid I'm so distracted by the problems in this house. I'm afraid I'll forget. Something Stacy said just now made me realize one of the things that I always struggle with is that a lot of what we do can't be compartmentalized. There's an interconnectedness, there's a web to it. And one of the things I was thinking about when I was thinking about the strategic plan today was that we need something under one of those anchors, or a new anchor that has to do with identifying where our students are after a few months of crisis learning, a summer break, a fall of distance learning, part of a spring of distance learning. where have the losses occurred and what do we need to do to try to address it? And that plays into equity. That's part of equity. So part of our strategic plan has to be adapting our strategic plan to try to do damage control on this year. And that very much is connected to equity issues in our schools. So I'm not sure that there's a clean dividing line between some of these things that we're trying to do. That's all.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to get a small advanced preview on this since I was the other board buddy. But
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention.
no,
that
but like very much a preview. Kiki did literally 99.9% of this. So all I'm trying to say is I think it's very impressive. I think it addresses really what was called for in the resolution that Stacy and Linda wrote back in October. And I think I've been very lucky and privileged in my day job that the nonprofit I work for is invested heavily in our professional development in these spaces. And I think the idea of doing 100% of it over Zoom, I don't think will work exceptionally well. There are certain parts that will though. And I think that's just something to name, in that some of this is going to be hard or impossible to do over a screen. And we'll have to wait until that latter half of the year when we're hopefully vaccinated and back and able to do it in person. There are other pieces though that we can start on now. And so I think just, Kiki, as you think through the sequencing of it, just keeping that in mind is like the top flag for me.
Say that last sentence again, Kaylin.
I was that's top of mind for me, is like what parts of this work well.
Oh, top of mind. Yeah.
Yeah, and then which parts have to be kind of in person, and we may need to like wait a little bit longer until we are in that space again.
Well, and some of the resources that Kiki mentioned, she'd identified that we could do reading and listening and watching. Yeah, that can be done, and we can be, talking a little bit of the same language when we come together. But I really, really agree that this is going to be it just isn't an on-screen thing to do.
Yeah, and then I'll also just echo an agreement for facilitation, right? I don't think it's fair to Christina to have to do it. I think if we
No, I don't either.
I guess no one does, right? But like if there's we have to make a small budget allocation towards that type of training, that is something I'm willing to support. Robert, you have any thoughts?
First off, thank you very much. I've had the opportunity to watch more videos since the last time I said I've seen some videos. So thank you for that. I'm looking forward to seeing a couple of these. I don't have more to add, because one of the things I thought about in governance was we don't all have to say something every time we do something. So I'm going to leave it there.
Awesome.
That'd be a good norm, wouldn't it?
Meetings would be quicker.
Yeah.
Riley or Gitanjali, do you have anything? Or Bob, did you want to add anything? Great. We can move on. Thank you all.
All right. And Stacy, did you have something else? Okay. All right, board. So we have gone through our objectives for the night. I think actually before we get to closing though, what are the next steps, Christina? And like, what does that timeline look like?
For me?
Yeah. Or what do you need from us?
Yeah, I mean, I could bring something February 4th with a little bit more fleshed out, try to get a facilitator and then have some, just have a little bit more of a fleshed out plan. I can hop onto that plan, that next set of next steps with everyone else. Is there anything else?
Guess what? I got my internet back.
All right.
Just in time. Stacy?
Yeah.
So I think that since we're really looking at a training, this is really like a curriculum, right? For the board. I'm wondering if, and the answer can absolutely be no, but I'm wondering if we want to try to come up with some measurements of, when we get to the end of the year by going through this curriculum, here's some, you've got some high level stuff in here around the essential questions and the learning objectives. Are the learning objectives kind of like at the end of the year, we're going to be able to do these 3 things? I'm just maybe trying to make the translation between education and the way I do things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. All right. So,
Can I add anything to this then from an objective?
sorry, say it again.
Can I add one thing to this as
Yeah.
an objective? I think this is great stuff, but the thing that it's all about the money, right? It's all about making sure your budgets are aligned to your strategic imperatives. And if we're going to be serious about making this transformation, we have to make sure that we're also doing budgeting with an equity lens. And that in and of itself is a kind of like a new framework and process. So I'm just wondering if you want to add that for consideration as well.
Sure.
I had it back for half a minute. Now it says can't connect to this network.
It's okay, Linda. We're going to adjourn in a couple minutes, I think. So.
Okay.
But yeah, board. So have we accomplished what we set out to accomplish? I guess I'll start with that question.
Yes.
I think we have.
Maybe even more.
Okay. Is there anything else we
Yeah.
have on these topics before we move to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Motion by Christina. I think it was Stacy. Seconded. Maybe Linda. I don't know. We'll give to Stacy. Any discussion on that motion? See none. Can we please have a roll call vote?
Trustee Gallagher,
Aye.
trustee Aerosmith,
Aye.
trustee Brown,
Aye.
trustee Goitia,
Aye.
trustee Verich.
Aye.
All right. With a 5-0 vote, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Student board members, thank you for joining, and see y'all next week.
Good night. Stay safe.
Okay. Good night. Thank you all.